the message would be like, dude, you're capable of so much more. Like I would have gotten into real estate 30 years ago.
Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. Together, we'll explore practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Making small changes is possible and can lead to big results. Are you ready? Let's go do this. Hey, Dave, welcome. I'm really excited about this interview. How you doing?
Doing pretty awesome. It's a beautiful day here in late October in Ann Arbor. I was just outside. It's still like 65, 70 degrees. So wonderful.
Oh, nice.
Last minute.
That's funny. I'm down in South Carolina and it is actually, was my phone say, oh, it's 75 down here. So
perfect.
Yeah. It's great weather. The fall is great. And what's nice where we are is that the trees actually do change. We actually do get seasons here still, with it being as far south as we are. So that had surprised me with relocating down here. So again, Dave, welcome. You came from a very interesting W-2 that you left to pursue entrepreneurship. I let my guests start where they like in their stories, but if you could like weave that into your story and talk a little bit about the catalyst that made you decide to leave that position.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I guess I really want to reach out to, and hopefully my story resonates with engineers, accountants, teachers, whoever has a fear that if they leave this job that provides a steady income that they can't do it. And I'll explain why I did things in a way that I felt really mitigated my risk in leaving, which was very simple, which is replace most, if not all, of your income. And we can get into that in a relatively quick fashion by reaching out, doing some research, and talking to trusted friends. But basically was an engineer for 30 years, a little bit more than 30. I did engine calibration for a living. I had an absolutely wonderful job. I worked for General Motors, Chrysler, Rolls-Royce, and Detroit Diesel. And what engine calibration means is they give you next year's car and with next year's engine in it, and you get a computer and you have a laptop stand on the passenger seat, and you make the car run as smoothly as possible, or you do diagnostics on the car. And so you're driving next year's cars and you're making them run smoothly. And they're typically taking you to places to push the cars. So you're doing testing in Death Valley, or you're doing testing near Breckenridge, Colorado, up in the mountains. And it's just absolutely, not only are you doing like high altitude or warm weather, but you're doing it in absolutely gorgeous places. So you're getting paid to go to these national parks and drive around and make things run smoothly, which is a pretty cool gig. One of my fun things to ask people when I talk to whoever is, well, how long have you been in this job? And if it's like, if anybody says more than 2 or 3 years, it's like, oh, this must be a pretty good job, because if it was bad, you would leave. So it's like a litmus test for good jobs or bad jobs. And a lot of people that are engine calibrators do that the rest of their career once they get into it, because it's a really funny, enjoyable job. But my catalyst was I ended up not seeing eye to eye with my boss, and I had looked at real estate. I'm in my 50s. I'd looked at real estate the first time as a 16-year-old. I read a book on buying apartments, and I still vividly remember that. And I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to college. I'm going to buy one after college. And then I said, well, I'm going to buy one when I'm more stabilized in my career. And then I'm going to buy one after I get married. And then I'm going to buy one when the kids get a little bit older. And in the early 50s, I had never bought anything other than a primary residence. My job was going pretty good, but basically didn't see eye to eye with the boss and just made the decision it's time to leave. And I set 2 goals. One is I was going to replace my engineering income with real estate, and 2, I was going to do it in 2 years or less. I ended up jumping on Bigger Pockets, did a bunch of research, looked at multifamily, investing in multifamily. I knew I could replace my income with multifamily. I just didn't think I could do it in 2 years or less or guarantee. And that was an equally important goal. And I ended up discovering short-term rentals, looked at different markets. The one that I thought was the easiest to do exceptionally well in was the Smoky Mountains. So I started buying in the Smoky Mountains, which is Eastern Tennessee, Gatlinburg, or Pigeon Forge, in 2018. And I ended up making the decision in March, bought my first one in May, my second one in August, my third one in November, and took a buyout February of 19. So
Oh,
11
wow.
months after I made the decision is when I took the buyout. And I guess for people that have anxiety about doing something like that, it all just comes down to simple math. What are you comfortable with? What is your burn rate? If you're making 100,000 a year but you're putting 50,000 a year into a 401k or saving it, then you're living on 50 a year. So you really only need to replace 50 a year. You don't need to replace 100 a year. I had a decent amount of money saved up, and I was debating, can I get by with 50%, 60%, 70%? I don't know. And then for me, there was the added difficulty of I had 3 kids. My youngest was going to graduate and go to college,
Mm,
or excuse me, my oldest. So I had 3, and then a year later, a second was going to go to college, and then 4 years later, a third. And I'm like, this makes it more complicated.
hmm
So basically, I said, I don't want to try to get by with 50%, 60%. If I replace 100% of my engineering income, I'm going to leave. And that's what I ended up doing.
Oh, wow. And even with buying all those properties, just running the analysis on them, and then that replaced your income. Were the numbers enough for you?
No, and the numbers were really shaky and sketch, quite honestly. So nobody nobody was optimizing anything. So I will tell you how not to do an Airbnb in the Smokies. The very first one I bought. No, I did better than they did, but this is what I'm trying to distill numbers from. So
Hmm
the people that owned the very first cabin that I bought, they charged $225 a night Sunday through Thursday, and on Friday night and Saturday night they charged $275. 52 weeks a year. So they were
mm
completely sold out in the summer because they were priced too low. They
hmm
never had anybody in the winter, and in the spring and in the fall. When you're doing numbers based on a property that's their pricing strategy, you know that you're going to do way better than that, but you're really not sure exactly what it's going to be.
hmm
So in that case, I was like, I can actually do better than break even with their horrible numbers. So I know that I will do fairly well. And then instantly, and I ended up buying at the end of May. And in the Smoky Mountains, one of the things that's super appealing is you're buying them fully furnished, everything, plates,
mm
silverware, TVs, curtains, everything stays. So you're closing on a Wednesday, and I literally had everything rented out that weekend.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
I buy in May, I instantly have the June numbers and the July numbers, and I'm like, wow, this is doing great. So it did significantly better than the previous people had done. That gave me confidence to buy the second one.
And
Ended
you
up
were
getting
s-
the second one in August, and then the third one in November.
and you were still at your W-2 too, so you were able to leverage
Exactly.
that in order to help you buy the other properties. Some might see like what you do or what you've built is being risky, but does it still all just boil down to the numbers, or is there a component there that you have to fight on the inside to say, okay, there is some risk here, but I'm really conservative?
I think a lot of people don't ask the right questions about certain markets.
Mhm.
So right now, if somebody wanted to buy an Airbnb, which Airbnb's gotten, short-term rentals gotten competitive, super competitive. Everybody poured in. Everybody said, "Look, all these other guys made money. I'm going to come in." In my mind, one of the litmus tests is how many people are pouring in. And right now, if somebody wanted to buy Bourbon Trail in Kentucky, still makes sense. I literally just did my numbers for the last bunch of months from a place I bought there. Really good numbers, paying 8% interest on the place. So a lot of the reason I bought in the Smokies was when I was talking to real estate agents in different markets is how many people are coming in. And there were just a ton pouring into the Smokies. It's like, okay, the numbers might make sense, but when basically a bunch of other people were double checking my work, I wasn't able to talk to them. I didn't know exactly what numbers they were crunching, but a lot of people were coming in, gave me more confidence to do the first place. And the other thing that I think is super important is I was still filled with fear, right? Oh my gosh, this could go horribly wrong. It was a 10% down property. It was a second home property. So I
Mhm.
had enough income to support it. So when you're only doing 10% down, and I still remember very vividly having the discussion in my own head of, what if I never rent this thing out another day? Now, I knew these other guys were renting it out just fine. And I said, if I never rent it out another day, I lower the price 10,000 or 15,000, I sell it, I lose like 30,000.
Mhm.
So downside, lose $30,000. Upside, financial independence. Okay,
Mhm.
I'll take that trade. And then, yeah, and it's not going to be you never rent it out another day. And all these other
Right.
people are pouring in. But I like really lopsided deals where the downside is tolerable and the upside is really strong. I don't like anything that I could make 10 or 15% on, really not interested in it. I
Mhm.
want outsized value. I want outsized returns.
Mhm. Mhm. Isn't it funny how we take fears and we think they're going to come true and they never really do? It's like we talk ourselves into a box, but when you run it by the numbers, it's like, wait a minute, no, that's not, just like you did, the worst case scenario. How bad is the worst case scenario? My W-2 income still covers the mortgage, and I know I'm going to rent this thing out. So, do you find that with those fears that come up, they really actually don't materialize anyway? You know?
I think that's super accurate. I heard I heard a saying that said more people die of worrying about what might happen than the thing they were actually worrying about.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing is, I would say try to put yourself in circles of people that are experts. And so, I mean, I'm part of a group called Go Abundance. And right now I have like, if I ever do any real estate investing anymore, it's I call people and I bounce it off them. And what am I
Mm.
missing? What do you see in this? And there's so many different experts in that particular group of people that like
Yeah.
my risk is significantly mitigated just by knowing those guys and having them in my phone.
That's awesome. It does go with the saying, who you know determines where you go. Or
Hmm.
there's also the, you are the sum of the five people you hang around the most with.
Hmm.
And that also helps. And then you also listen to Bigger Pockets. So you educated yourself first. But at the end of the day, we could listen to books and we could educate ourselves out to no end, but it's taking that actionable step. So I know you have real estate. You're also into some other things too, that you've built businesses and talk a little bit more about what else you do and have built.
Yeah. I was just talking to somebody before this podcast. And then I said, and then this thing happened that I didn't mean to happen. And then this thing happened by accident. And just one thing leads to another. And if you're open and you're aware, and if you have your plate cleared off enough that you're not buried in work and can actually see these things come by and grasp them and play with them in your mind. So basically what ended up happening is after I took the buyout, I ended up getting on a couple podcasts. A bunch of people reached out to me saying, can you help me do this? And ended up getting a real estate team going in the Smokies. So that I was able to help a bunch of people add significant amounts to their net worth by helping put them in the best cabins. And then that ended up spinning off another business because what I found is I really don't like to work 3 or 4 hours to crunch numbers to figure out what the best cabins are in the Smokies. So to this day, I still have a virtual assistant that does that. So every cabin that's ever come on the market in the Smokies in the last year and a half, we've done the analysis on it. We have
Wow.
spreadsheets of it. And 5% turns green, 95% turns red. We only tell people to buy the green stuff. Pretty straightforward. We save a lot of people a lot of headaches and hassles. So, but what came of that is I ended up getting an incredible virtual assistant because I found I didn't want to crunch for 4 hours, hand it to a client. I did one where I handed it to a client and the client said, "Oh no, I don't want to buy that." And I was not happy. I was not happy at all. Do 4 hours of work. Here you go. This is exactly what, like, if it was my mom, I'd
Yeah.
tell my mom to pick this one. Nope,
Yeah.
not doing it. Didn't have a porch. It didn't have something. I don't even.
How'd that make you feel when they turned around and did that?
Well, it so and this is where having other trusted people in your life is important. I was mad. I was not happy. And I had a coach at the time and I said, "I'm never doing that again." And he's like, "What would the commission have been on that if you would have sold it to him?" And I told him, and what would, how many hours did you have into this deal and how many hours would you have ended up with? And basically the hourly rate ended up coming out to more than $1,000 an hour. And he's like,
Mm.
can you find somebody else to do this?
Mm.
Well, I guess I could get a virtual assistant. Never occurred to me until then. So, I mean, that pain caused me to explore virtual assistants. I ended up finding an incredible virtual assistant and started out by kind of going through my emails, making sure my calendar was correct, and then doing analysis on every property that was showing up in the Smoky Mountains. So that's how I ended up getting her. And she ended up being so amazing that I told a couple other friends, and they said, do you think she could get me one like that? I said, I have no idea. Let me ask her. She ended up getting 3 for people. And the conversation at the end was always the same. Well, what do I owe you? And I, nothing, don't worry about it. And then another guy, another Ann Arbor friend, said, you do realize you have a virtual assistant placement company, don't you? And that you actually have a service that's valuable and you should charge for it. I'm like, I had no idea. I'm like, no, I don't know. I don't know that. If he wouldn't have said that, I'd probably still be giving them away for free. And then I realized that, one, I had a virtual assistant placement company, and 2, I believe that our product is better than a lot of the other products out there. Just we're going for the best of the best. We want college educated, 5 years experience in the field that people are looking for. And what we're trying to do is take the training time down to half and make it that person's actually helping you. When you say, I want this done with my email, they say, well, maybe you want that, or maybe you want this other thing. If you want what you want, that's fine. But we want to bring in that experience level that takes everything up a notch, that they're like trusted business companion, trusted business partner, not just, okay, I can do whatever you say and I can't think on my own.
Yeah. Do you think that that comes in because you find VAs that have experience behind them with that 5+ years experience that they can come in and actually come alongside the person they're working with rather than just jumping into and just being, just doing what they're told?
Exactly. So I like to tell stories that let people know exactly what my experience has been and kind of summarizes the situation. So, Jess is my rock star first person I hired. And basically, our very first conversation was, she asked me, what time zone are you in? I said Eastern. She said, I'm planning on working from you from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern, unless you think I'll be more effective by shifting my hours one way or the other. Just let me know. And then our second discussion point was, she asked me, so what do you need help with? And I said, my email. And she said, what do you need? And I said, I think I need this, this, and this. And she's very gentle with me. And she goes, well, we could do this, this, and this. Or we could do this, 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 and this. But if you want those first 3 things, no, Jess, I want you to do, yeah, that 10 years experience is showing through right now. I want you to do exactly what the 5 things that you proposed, because that was a way better plan. And that's the trusted business partner. And that's where that experience comes in. A lot of other companies will train VAs, but it's a couple week training program.
Hmm.
And then here you go, where that 5 years experience, they got to see what works, what doesn't work. They get to push back a little bit. And bottom line is, if I would have said, I want exactly what I want, at no point has she ever said, you have to do what I'm saying. There's always, we can do whatever you want. This may work better. Your call. What do you think? And without exception, I've always gone with whatever she thinks because it's a better plan.
And then from there, it started growing. Yes. And how long ago was that when you first hired her to where you are today? Talk a little bit about the progression of your company.
Right. So I hired her a year ago, February, and technically the company started in like April, but I wasn't charging anything. So I think in April and May, we placed 3. Then I started charging. And then that summer, it started to grow slowly. But so it'd be, I would say June is the first time I charged anybody. And since then, we've placed roughly 100 VAs. We've never advertised. The word of mouth. We typically get 2
Mhm.
referrals for everybody that we place, because the people we place are so amazing that people have to tell their friends. And they're like, I want a favor from my friends, and I'm going to tell them this really cool outsized value thing that, they're going to pay under minimum wage, get somebody with 5 years experience that's college educated and motivated, that has top-notch healthcare in the Philippines. And the other biggest thing that I've seen from clients is when you're new, kind of like me with the short-term rentals. I had no idea, was it going to work? Thought it might work, hoped it
Mhm.
worked, but wasn't sure. And the thing is, other people hear, hey, I know that I'm supposed to have a VA or my life would be easier, but I'm not exactly sure what all they do. So the other thing that my company has is a thing called performance maximization, where we meet with the client once a week and we meet with the VA once a week. And basically, it's maximizing the performance of the VA as quickly as possible is half of it. And then the other half is asking the client, are you, tell me a little bit more about your business. Do you realize the VA can do this, 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 and this? So one of my
Mhm.
favorite stories is a friend of mine in Orlando had a VA full time, didn't know if he could use her the full amount, struggled to fill her day, started to ask more questions. We started to offer more. And basically, when all was said and done, he ended up having to hire a second VA because he realized there was so much more work that was getting done.
Yeah, yeah. I just had a conversation today. I was on call with GoBundance Women, and we just had like a monthly meetup call. And the gal was talking today. She had a lot of things on her plate. And I said, what really was the game changer for you that allows you to be able to juggle short term rentals? She's starting a coaching company. She does sober living facilities. She's a private money lender. She has an equity fund. Everything. I'm like, you had so
Wow.
many things on your plate. I said, what has been the game changer for you? And she said, it's just exactly what she said. She said, I hired a VA.
Mhm.
She said, that was the game changer for me. She said, I finally got over it. I hired a VA. And she said, it has freed up my brain to be able to go and pursue all these other things that I've been pursuing. So, what's one thing that you thought would be hard about building your business, your Rockstar VA business, but really turned out wasn't?
I thought I was going to have to be making way more decisions than I actually do. And basically, what that ended up coming from is hiring really good people
Mm.
that knew how to hire other people. Hired our fourth hire in the company was somebody that was in management for a different VA placement company. So basically, he came in. Oh, by the way, do you have this, this, and
Mm.
I don't need to invent anything. My goal is to be really good at figuring out what the best stuff is to copy, and then possibly and hopefully putting my own little tweak on it to make it even better. You hire people that have experience, you're getting the playbook of that gets you most of the way there, and you want to put your own little tweak on it, it's fine. And encouraged. There are things he mentioned that I I would have never thought of. I said, well, you realize this, that, oh, didn't know that. That's awesome. Thank you very much for sharing. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, the other thing too, you're hiring really good people that have that experience, but I think I don't want to overlook the fact that you are open and receptive to hearing other points of view. I think entrepreneurs in general may struggle with that, like wanting to run the show all themselves and not looking for a different perspective. So I can see that would be a really good quality to have, to be able to be open to other people's input and perspective that's going to allow your company to grow even more. Yes.
Completely agree. I was in a small group last week and there was a guy, it almost, I'm almost like, I can't even believe this happened. But basically, a guy shared a situation and another guy shared how he could have saved literally millions of dollars.
Wow.
And I'm like, I don't want to be the guy that makes that multi-million dollar mistake and doesn't reach out. And there were two over $1 million shifts that occurred that if they would have asked somebody, they would have been $1 million or more better for either their
Wow.
company or their personal portfolio. When I hear things like that, I get super inspired. Yeah, I really don't know everything, and I really don't want to be the guy that has the story of, there was this $3 million mistake I made once. If I would have asked a couple of people, they would have told me. I mean, the guy just said, yeah, do you realize this and this? And they were like,
Yeah.
no. And then and it was actually the same person that 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 let these guys know here's the path that would have been best,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's the power of the tribe again, isn't it? Like the
Exactly.
power of who you surround yourself with. But, that's only half of it. You can surround yourself with the best people in the world, but if you're not actually listening to what they're saying,
Absolutely.
and it falls on your deaf ears, and you're still going to do what you're going to do anyway. Although there's always a place, I mean, we should evaluate the information that's coming at us, but there's also a balance between saying, okay, that person probably knows more than what I know. So maybe I should take this path because I'm not sure what to do. So it's always a delicate, fine balance there. What's one thing that you thought would be easy about building your business, but turned out not being so easy?
I guess I actually thought it would grow even faster. So, I mean, we
Mm,
placed roughly 100. I thought it would just take off even more so because I think the value that we're offering is just so outsized.
mhm.
So, I don't know. So we're now working on marketing, as you're aware, and we're going to
Yeah.
start marketing for the first time. I think we've done really well for no marketing whatsoever, but it's like,
I think so too. Yeah. I think, and you know what? It's like anything, it'll hockey stick when it's going to hockey stick, and you don't really have a crystal ball as to when that's going to happen. I mean,
right,
whether it's podcasts or, anything really, it's just, I don't want to say it's fate because you always have to put the hard work into it, but sometimes those things just take off when you least expect it.
right.
So I wouldn't get this. Certainly wouldn't be discouraged, but I think when you have a really good product and the word starts spreading, then that's when it's gonna take off. What's your vision for your company?
My vision is to donate massive amounts of money to fund child sex trafficking missions that free kids and get them back to their families. So
Mm,
that's the reason I'm building this company is to do that, is to accomplish that goal. A friend of mine and myself, we ended up funding one mission this summer. 13 kids got returned to their families.
wow.
Just
How did
absolutely amazing.
how does
And I'm
that make
like,
you feel
how
deep down? Yeah.
I've my wife and I have been, you know, have given charitably in the past. I've never had a feeling when they told me, you know, 7 traffickers got arrested, 13 kids got returned to their families. I'm like,
Wow.
I can't even imagine. I've never had anything come close to feeling that amazing that I helped liberate these kids and get them back to their families, and the fear that they must have had and the fear that the parents must have had. Yeah. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, time to grow
Yeah.
this thing and get more serious about it and start following the
Yeah.
coach's steps. I think
Yeah.
that's one other thing I think that's worth mentioning. We both have a mutual friend, Jamie Gruber, and I used to think Jamie was crazy because he said the amount that he was spending on coaches and it was more than $10,000. And I'm like, don't you know there's YouTube videos for free? What is the matter with you, man? I thought he was like crazy, like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And he's not crazy. And I've had different coaches at different times. And if you want some really good advice, get people that are really good in that area and get them to coach you, and they will save you from making a lot of mistakes. So, and help you shape your business and send it in different directions that you might not have thought about sending it, and help you make it better, faster, and more
Mm.
resilient.
So what helped you overcome the thought that, oh, it's crazy to hire a coach?
I think it was almost the same thought process. It kind of was the same process of the first cabin. If I really, if everything goes horribly wrong, what will I lose? And
Mhm.
if things go really well, what will I gain? I'm like, well, I'll lose the coaching fees. And, my current coach is awesome. And I'm like, if I pay him, whatever I pay him, I've lost, you know, I can lose that money, but he's always provided more value. And I find
Yeah.
if you trust the process, saying I'm going to pay this money and there's no guaranteed returns, but this guy's pretty good, has a pretty good reputation. I think we're going to try that. And I think a lot of the growth that I've had is because not only from the teachability, but also kind of the coachability and the willing to spend money on coaches, on GoBundance, on other masterminds.
What was the most surprising benefits that you got out of coaching that maybe you didn't expect?
I would say ideas that, so certain coaches, certain coaches that aren't as good for entrepreneurs will be like, do this, do that. The coach I currently have is very honest. He goes, I'm going to ask you questions. You're going to think it's your idea and then you're going to do it. But in reality, it's going to be my idea, but that's okay. I don't need credit for any ideas. I need you to get to do this stuff. And basically asking questions on things that I would have never thought of. So it's
Mhm.
very similar to kind of the VA company and getting somebody that worked for another VA placement company. You're getting things are getting put in your mind that you would have never, I would have never thought of. I can think of two instant examples and I'm like, oh, that's like never would have occurred. Not only never would have occurred, but when he said them, I'm like, I'm not doing that. And it took like 2 months of him asking over and over and finally saying, how about we just do a comparison test? Because he could tell I wasn't going to do it. He tried to get me to agree to it. Nope, not doing it, not doing it. And then how about a comparison test? Because they're just giving you the softball is not helping. Uh, so yeah,
Once you realize that what he was suggesting works, does that change your interaction from now on out? Like if he suggests something now, you're not as resistant?
exactly. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that 30 years or 40 years of experience that he has, that actually does count for something. He's just not making this up. I'm like, oh, yeah. So
Sometimes it's hard to get out of our own way, isn't it?
it really is. And yeah, so yeah, his name's Gary Kishbaugh, in case anybody's wondering. And he's really interesting guy, and he'll even talk about my teachability versus other people's teachability and stuff like that. And I think that's also an interesting metric if you are going to work with a coach of where am I,
Mhm.
am I really resistant, am I not resistant? And
Yeah. Yeah.
you want to get the maximum value, which is going to involve kind of listening to the guy that you're paying to coach you.
Yeah, right. And then, like, just don't go for a coach if you don't really want to coach. And I think to your point, you mentioned about different coaches, there's different coaches for different reasons. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's important to make sure you get the coach to match why you're hiring that coach. Like if I want to figure out who I am and what my direction is, I'm not going to go hire a real estate coach. you know
Exactly.
so I want to make
Exactly.
sure if I want to grow my business, I'm going to go find a business coach as well. Dave, I got a question for you. I get the impression you're kind of like chill and just, very, very down to earth. What brings you the most joy out of the life that you've created for yourself? You left your W-2. So now you're into entrepreneurship. It's a completely different place and you left that comfort, traded it for something else. What brings you the most joy now for what you have created for yourself?
It's absolutely wonderful to have passive income coming in that you can kind of do whatever you feel like. The thing that brings me the most joy is helping others realize their potential, whether it's entrepreneurs, whether it's regular W-2 people, whether it's whatever. I'm like, if you would have told me 5 years ago I would be a developer, I would own a real estate company, and I would have a virtual assistant placement company, I'd have been like, you are absolutely insane. There's just no way. And now I'm like, oh, and I got exposed to a bunch of really big thinkers this past summer, and I had a charitable giving goal that we kind of talked about before that was smaller than what it is now. And it's like, yeah, I'm going to do this, and it's going to be awesome. So it's kind of like I think there was a Navy SEAL that said when most people think they're 100% done, how much done are they? And he said, oh, about 40%. They got another 60 to go, easy.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh. And I I used to think that I was very average. My engineering skills, my math skills, that was just kind of something everybody had. I did not have an unfair advantage. And I think everybody has an unfair advantage no matter who they are. And I get great pleasure in pointing out people's unfair advantage to them and say, do you realize that you're really exceptionally good at this? There's a
Mm.
friend I'm going to talk to on Sunday, and I'm going to kind of blow his mind. It'll be very fun. But yeah,
That's
but he
great.
he you know
Ha-
he's good, but he has no idea how good he is.
Mm,
So I just
mhm.
love sharing with people. Do you realize this? And have you considered this? Oh, I haven't. And then be able to support them going forward.
Yeah. Do you think what allows you to be able to do that? Because I don't think that's something that everybody can do to be able to see
I
their potential.
Yeah, I don't know. One is I'm very extroverted, so I will go up and talk to people, and my daughter will afterwards will say, "Did you know that person?" I'll be like, "No," and she just she just rolls her eyes like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, just walk up and start conversations with people I've never met. And a lot of times I see the abilities that I had that I never recognized. So it makes it a lot easier to see things in other people that they just think is normal and everyday, and they don't realize that they do that significantly better than other people. So
Mm,
I like
mhm,
to I like to compliment a lot, and I like the way it makes other people feel, and then I like the way it makes me feel that I was able to point that out in a way that's you know clear, not like over the top, just like this is accurate and you can do with that
mm,
information what you want. But then I hope,
right.
my goal is it inspires them to do a lot more than they think they can and to feel
Mhm,
good about it.
mhm. If you could go back to your younger self and deliver a message, what would it be and why?
Well, that's interesting. The message would be like, dude, you're capable of so much more. Like I would have gotten into real estate 30 years ago and it would have been awesome. But at the same time, like I had a lot of anxiety and fear. I don't want to downplay that whatsoever. I don't know. I don't know if I talked to myself whether I could have overcome that.
Mhm,
Like I still view myself as very risk adverse. The deals I do, my money's coming out and my investors' money's coming out pretty fast. Can't be much safer than they are. So whether I would have told myself that and things were going up and down, and I don't know, a couple recessions, 80s, and then 2008, 2009,
mm,
would that have scared me? Would I have been conservative enough? I don't know.
mhm,
So I mean, I'm quite comfortable being where I am right now. I didn't need to switch from engineering any sooner than I did, even though I did it in my 50s. Would It would not have been bad had I overcome that fear and anxiety, but it took being unhappy in the workplace to get me out of that. So
mhm.
it took what it needed to take. I wasn't that good at listening before, so I doubt I would have listened to my own advice even.
Then maybe you weren't ready either, you know? I always
Exactly.
say it's hard. I mean, it's a very interesting question to ask because the flip side of that is you can say all things happen in perfect timing.
Hmm.
So that's the one way to look at it. And the other way, and I've had somebody pose this to me that really kind of blew me away. And this was a couple months ago. They said, Sue, do you think things happen to you or happen for you? And I really thought about that. Do things happen to you or happen for you? And when you
Hmm.
put it in light of things happening for you, then everything that's happened to you up to this point in time where we are right now are perfectly orchestrated,
Hmm.
and that nothing is a coincidence. So there's nothing to regret. There's nothing to go back to. It's always an interesting question. I mean, the other version of that question is what would your 80-year-old self tell your, today year old self? And that's just another twist on it to look back and say, what would they say now? So you could answer that if you want, but I just threw that one out there.
I
But
think my 80-year-old stuff would be like, this is pretty good. So and how this happened, I wish I could tell you, but I'm not really sure. But last summer, to use a Jason Drees kind of quote, I came into alignment and like there are no hard
mm-hmm,
decisions anymore. And I just do stuff. I don't worry that much. If it's about a kid making really bad decisions, I worry. If it's about me and about other things I'm doing, I don't worry.
mm-hmm,
And it's like this outrageously easy way to go through life. I've been kind of waiting on my life to go through life easier and not be completely stressed out and freaked out. And what if this
Mhm.
happens? And what if this happens? And yeah, I'm pretty sure my 80-year-old self is going to be like, yeah, that kind of a year ago until now is when you hit your stride and got to enjoy life a lot more and worry a lot less. So it's a wonderful
Yeah,
thing. I wish I
yeah,
could tell people exactly how I did that. I'm not sure. I've done a decent amount of work up until then
yeah.
on myself and counseling and things like that.
Yeah, probably working on yourself, that self-improvement, that
Mhm.
it, and sometimes it's you can't put a pinpoint on when something clicks or something happens in the mind to make you head that way. I know one of the things that you've encouraged me with that I've really appreciated is the phrase at ease. So
Mm,
when you're looking at a challenge or whatever, now no matter what it is, I always put at ease at
mm.
the end of it. And it just seems those two words seem to make something that is either impossible, challenging, difficult, or just plain hard a little bit more attainable. And so that's one thing I appreciate that you taught me to look at whatever the challenge is and to add at ease at the end of it. So for that, I'm thankful.
Yes,
Yeah.
and yeah. So I like this right here. It's been chewed on by a dog, so it's not as pretty as it used to be. But
Yeah.
what would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail, and then with ease added at the end of it?
And with these, yeah. And I was going to ask you that. That was one of my questions. If there was something that you could do that had no time or money constraints now that you've, built this life for yourself, what would it be?
I think I'm not anywhere near
Mm,
what I'm capable of. So it's hanging out with, still continuing to mastermind, still continuing to meet amazing, inspirational people. And it's really interesting. A lot of these guys you have to ask the questions of. So there was a guy that I was talking to that was talking about some sounded pretty big things, and he built a community for single moms.
mm,
And then somebody said, "Well, single dads are overlooked." So he's like, "Oh, okay." So he built a community for single dads. And I'm like, he's acquiring land, he's building all these different housing units, all this stuff like that. I'm like, what are and he's not out bragging about it. And you could bump into him on the street, you'd never know it. And
yeah.
yeah, he was driving an older car up until recently, which is, I think, is fun. But I asked him, what are you planning on giving to charity? And he's in a group that I'm in that's where people are willing to share their financial stuff, which I think is unfortunate that more people aren't more comfortable sharing that, because I think a lot of good could
Mm,
be done by just feeling comfortable enough to ask other people and then being inspired by them. And he goes, "Oh, well,
mhm.
I'm planning on giving 250 million to charity."
Wow.
And this is a guy that's driving like a 8-year-old car, right? There's more than
Yeah.
100,000 miles on it. I'm like, "Oh, so you don't have to get the flashy Ferrari. You don't have to do whatever. And
Yeah.
if you want to do that, that's fine. I'm not saying that to judge, but I'm like, there are people out there making significant changes. Those are the type of people I want to hang out with. If I want to,
Hmm.
I want to change the world for the better. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's my goal.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. And that's something you've already started doing. And that's something that, that this is what I love. It never grows old. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on the concept of retirement. If you're just building something, if you like to just build things that help people and make money, then the concept of retirement really isn't a concept.
No, not at all. I completely agree. One of the books that I would encourage everybody to read is Die with Zero. And I used to think of myself as a logical thinker, and then I read Die with Zero, and I'm like, I am following all of these societal norms. I'm not thinking for myself. This is so
Mm,
embarrassing. So Die with Zero is huge. But yeah, but when you're in alignment and doing what you want to do, and then the other big thing of that is knowing what you don't want to do and just don't do it. Hire people to do that, or find
mhm,
people to do that. You don't even need to necessarily hire them. There's, the development I'm doing. I have a partner that is, lived in that area of Eastern Tennessee for his whole life, knows everybody, build a couple houses a year, but he normally just buys a lot. We decided to do this development, and I'm good at capital raising and big overview of what the business should be like. and he's really good at getting the work done, getting the permits, getting everything lined up with a civil engineer. So it isn't even like I have to hire him. I need to partner with him. And
Mm-hmm.
together we are way better than if he did it by himself or I did it by myself. It'd be a disaster. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, okay, who can I partner with? What do I need to trade? What do I need to do to remove the things that I'm either one, not good at, or two, I don't like to do?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then
It,
you're so much more powerful that way.
yeah. Is that just giving yourself eyes to see too? Like, I just telling you, looking for those opportunities, just being open to things that come your way and just,
Yeah. I mean, and that was that whole thing was I was not a developer 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago now. And
mm,
basically a guy said, hey, I can raise a bunch of money. Do you want to explore doing a whole development in the Smokies instead of just building a one-off cabin for me? How about we build a whole neighborhood full of these?
mm-hmm,
And I show up, I'm not a developer, but I start talking to these guys. The deal with that particular guy didn't work out, but it ended up spinning off this other development that's gone exceptionally well. Especially
mm-hmm,
it could have gone so much. There's multiple things that I've learned from this development, and if what I know now I would have known back then, I wouldn't have done the development. But three things have fallen
mm,
in our favor that were just amazing. So it's going fine, but it could have easily
yeah,
not gone fine. But that's yeah, I
go
used to
ahead.
really disagree with the bigger pockets. I absolutely hated their stupid 90-day challenge
Mm,
of buy something in 90 days. I'm like, well, what if you can't find a good deal in 90 days? But I think it's actually probably more important to buy something, get those lessons done. I think they're pretty
mm,
straightforward too. Like, you might not make any money. And I'm like, well, why would you want to do that? Well, because you're learning all this stuff. That's why. And now your fear of making mistakes, well, you've already made them. So it's time to do bigger stuff and keep moving.
yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. I would have thought, the 90-day challenge, if you didn't buy something in 90 days, then you'd feel like a failure. But then the flip side of that is what you just said, like buying something in that 90 days, go through the learning curve, make
mm,
all the mistakes that you're going to make. I don't think that's emphasized enough. So I'm glad you said that, because the other, like I said, the flip side would just be, oh, I'm just not going to do anything because I don't want to make a mistake. But
right,
the reality is we are going to make mistakes, and that's not a bad thing.
right,
Mistakes are where the learning's made, so that you don't make them again,
right.
or at least try and mitigate them so that they're not as big. So Dave, before we close, I have to ask you, so you are a very productive person. You've started like 3 different companies, I've heard. You're doing all the stuff, but yet I see a picture of a sloth in the background. And for those who are watching, there's a sloth on screen. For those who are listening to the podcast, there's a sloth on Dave's wall. Not a real one, a picture. Now I'm very curious. What's up with the sloth?
So the sloth is a bunch of guys that I love decided to go surfing in Costa Rica. And I went surfing in Costa Rica with them for a week in July. And I'm driving down the street and there's this banner or whatever, bed sheet, I don't even know what you call it, but of that sloth. I'm like, I have to have it. And it was actually the one that I wanted. It was like a teal blue, and it was there all week. And I'm like, I'm just going to go get it. And, the next to the last day, I'm going to go and buy it. And I go up, and a woman walks up. Like, we both walk up at the same time. She's one step in front of me and goes, I want the teal blue one. And I'm like, really? Because I was going to buy this. She goes, oh, no, it's mine. And then this white one was there. And I'm like, it was the exact same print. It was just different color material. But yeah, I think sloths are cool.
Do you identify with the sloth, or do you just think they're just cool in general?
I I probably nap as much as sloths nap. I'm very much a nap guy. I'm very much a full night's sleep guy. I don't set an alarm. I set an alarm when I have a business meeting. If the business meeting is going to start before 10, I set an alarm. So about 3 days a week I set an alarm, but most days I just sleep in. So yeah, I'm a well-rested entrepreneur.
Well, that's good. It allows you to make well-rested decisions as
Exactly.
you relate. If I had to be an animal, I think I'm a cat. So I've got a couple of those hanging around, but they're
Oh,
just
cool.
quiet and stealth-like, but they have lots of energy when they need it. So as we're wrapping up, there's a core 3. I always ask everybody, you already answered one of them. And that
Okay.
is, what book do you have that's a recommendation? And that is Die with Zero.
Right.
And two other questions. The next one is, was there any topic or a question you wish I would have asked, and how would you have answered it or elaborated on the topic?
So the other question that I just heard, and I guarantee I will use this question in the future. Literally just heard it yesterday, but it's 1 year from now, if we're celebrating with a bottle of champagne, what are we celebrating? And the answer would be that my company's hit some massive revenue growth number so a lot more money goes to charity.
Cool.
But I will ask other people that question in the future, because it just, I used to ask kind of what excites you, but this kind of adds more clarity to it, of not only what excites you, but what makes you celebrate on what excites you.
That's a good question. That's a thinking question too, because it makes you think about, like, where do you want to be in a year? Set that goal.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's a great question. I might change my question to actually be that question. As
Cool.
we close, Dave, what's one small step that someone can do today which will help them change their tomorrow?
There are so many things that people can do to give themselves momentum. And it can be, I'm going to exercise for 5 minutes in the morning. Like right now, I'm back on exercising, and I'm like, I feel so much better. And I'm in my 50s, and I've known this for 40 some years, but I typically don't exercise. It's like, this is embarrassing to admit this, right? Exercise a little, do 5 minutes of meditation, do 5 minutes of praying, do 5 minutes of affirmations. There's so many different things that just 5 minutes a day. What 5-minute time slot do you want to give yourself? Lock it in now. And what will be most effective for those 5 minutes? You get the other 23 hours and 55 minutes to watch Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy and I don't know what
Sleep
other,
and take a nap.
sleep excessively and eat Mike and Ike's excessively. I don't know, but you just commit to the 5 minutes a day of what makes you better, and then do it. Set your alarm. Not, I'm going to do it when I remember to do it, because you're not going to remember. Set the alarm. These 5 minutes, this is what I'm doing. That is what I would recommend.
Awesome. Awesome small step. Dave, how can people find you, reach out to you?
Easiest way is Facebook, Dave Homyak. There's a yellow sunset behind me. There's a couple Dave Homyaks. One's my cousin. A couple I think I don't know. But yeah, just reach out to me there, DM me. Happy to talk. That's the easiest way.
What if people are interested in a VA?
My company's name is the Rockstar VAs. So you'd go to therockstarvas.com, sign up for a free consultation. And even if you're just exploring and you're like, I think I might want to know a little bit more. And even if you have a VA and you're not looking, but you wonder whether you have a rock star, go to therockstarvas.com, click on a free consultation. Jess will talk to you, and you will find out exactly what a Rockstar VA talks and acts like. And most of the time when some of my friends that have VAs do that, they text me like, holy cow, dude, she's amazing. I need one like her. So
awesome.
That would be the site.
All right. Well, and I'll put that stuff in the show notes too. Dave, thank you for the gift of your time. This has been awesome. We've been all over the place, and I enjoyed our conversation so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I thought you asked some amazing questions. Enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me, and I seek to make every moment count. In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, reach out to me and let's have a conversation. Until next time, love yourself, then love others. Peace.